Welcome to the Lakers Fast Break Nightcap. I'm your host, Joe Soro. You've asked and you shall receive. We had a pretty big group that wanted a nightcap tonight. This is an impromptu nightcap, but not really because we do prepare for the shows regardless if we're prepared for it or not. Sean will be here soon with us. Gerald, I don't know if you're going to be chiming in, but I'm sure he will at some point.
Chime.
Oh, good. Uh, we just got finished watching the debacle that was Game 6 between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. It looked like the Denver Nuggets did not want to play tonight and will decide the decider in Game 7 to see if they will continue to go on to the Western Conference Finals or will they be a one-and-done team, which is what I predicted before the season started. Why? Because the Denver Nuggets aren't as equipped as they were last year from the bench, and it's just very difficult to repeat in the NBA these days. Just too much competition, not enough depth, too much money spreading out to everyone nowadays with the new collective bargaining agreements and the aprons. So I'm still going to stick with Denver. I think Denver gets themselves together here for Game 7 and wins Game 7 to go on to likely face I would think the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, I think Oklahoma City could still take the next two, but I'm going to pick Dallas just because I trust Luka more than I trust anybody on Oklahoma City's team, despite Shea Gill just being on the team. So right now, it's looking like a Final Four of Denver, Dallas, and then the Celtics and likely the Knicks. How this plays out is going to be an interesting one depending on health. Right now, Kristaps Porzingis is still injured. We don't know if he'll be back in the next series or if he'll be back for the playoffs. For the finals, should the Celtics get there. And even if he does return, will he be available or at least at like 80 or 90%? Because most of the guys playing right now aren't really playing at 100%. The Celtics will need Porzingis to have a shot at beating likely Denver, which I think Denver will beat Dallas. And if they don't, then it's probably going to be a quick series. If Kristaps plays, it still could be a Denver win, but it might earn the Celtics an extra game in a 7-game series. So that's kind of where we stand there. We had discussed on observations earlier today with Stone Hansen, Sean, Nick Molina, and Gerald on what our thoughts are on the upcoming draft. We didn't go into too much on what the likely pick will be, other than just kind of what we kind of want, what we don't want, what's the preferred focus on what the Lakers should do. Stone had mentioned how the focus should not be just this coming year, although I thought that because I'm kind of fixated right now on making sure that we need to make sure that we are trying to win a championship. The future is the future. If we're going to sit here and talk about the future being kind of the basis of everything, I don't know. I'm just not. I don't know how you do both. I guess you could, but we can't really risk developing too much or focusing on development too much here in the coming year. We need guys to surprise us and hopefully be contributors to helping the team have some depth at a reasonable price, which is what the first and second round picks will be, as well as the mid-level exception, whomever that might be. So right now, I'm not getting a lot of chat responses. I did just get one from Blue Magic. Gerald, I don't know. I'm not getting any chat returns here on our station. I know we have 15 people watching, but I'm accessing it through the YouTube connect.
He says,
here.
"What is?" He's asking, "What if it's Mini versus Celtics?"
Why isn't it showing on our main
I think
chat
because
room?
you're the guest. You came in as a guest.
Oh,
so
okay. I got it. Okay.
got to come in as me.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start watching there. If it's Mini versus the Celtics, we're the
Oh, look at me.
Anthony Edwards is going to have to win the MVP and probably play MVP ball every game to assure that Minnesota will win it all. But unless Minnesota shows me something in Game 7, I just can't see them beating Denver in Denver at this moment. I think this game tonight was pretty dominant, but I think was also a combination of desperation as well as Denver really kind of checking out. I don't know why Denver would check out, but it just didn't seem like they were really interested after the first 5 to 6 minutes of the game. And oh boy, guys, just to make it clear for everyone, I don't care what Trevor Lane says. Trevor Lane doesn't likely do any real research on player evaluation or anything other than probably hearing stuff from what some other Yahoo is saying. Anyone who drafts Bronny James in the first or second round, any GM who drafts him should be fired the next day, and I'll stand on that until the cows come home, because it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the league, making this a mockery of the league, in that you're trying to turn a professional league that requires talent into a reality show. And I've been worried about this for years, a little bit, and maybe my naivete never thought this day would come, but it seems like this tabloid BS with this is continuing to infect all our news stations right now, which is why I'm staying away from it. I really am. I'm not watching any of the TNT broadcasts, even though I never really watched it anyways. I don't watch ESPN anymore. I don't watch anything on the websites unless I'm looking for scores and stats and just particular stories that interest me. But anything that continues to feed us not trash is just, I'm not going to support. And right now, the fact that there's even discussions of Bronny James being drafted, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the sport. It's a disgrace to talent and those players out there that actually have the talent to play in the NBA or should have the chance to play in the NBA. And so Sean's here. Sean, I'm just kind of reviewing a little bit of the information we talked about earlier today, and we delved into what my assumptions are on the finals matchup. I think it's still going to be Denver winning in 7, and I believe they'll beat Dallas to win the West, and then I believe Boston will beat New York in the Eastern Conference Finals. And if Kristaps Porzingis is not available, it'll be a short series, and if he is available, it's still going to be likely a win for Denver should they stay intact. So that's kind of where I stand on that. We had some people asking us what if it's Minnesota versus the Celtics. I think if Anthony Edwards plays, Anthony Edwards can play in every game, there's a likelihood that Minnesota can take that series as well. However, if he ends up going 5 for 19 in a couple of those games, then there could be pretty scary that the Celtics could take a series, could take the series against Minnesota.
Well, that would be the NBA Finals, aka KG's choice, Joe. He'd have to make a choice.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that until you just said it. That's pretty good. I don't think KG has any. KG didn't strike me as someone who had favoritisms for teams. I think he got drafted by Minnesota and played for them, and then he was traded to Boston because McHale gift wrapped him to his buddy Danny Ainge.
When Malik Sealy died, that really changed things in Minnesota, Joe.
Explain that. Why did Malik Sealy's death change things?
Well, that was they were best friends,
Mm-hmm.
and they went out to a party for Malik Sealy's birthday, and unfortunately, Joe, he was driving without a seatbelt, and he was hit and killed by a drunk driver, and that really took the wind out of KG's sails. He's admitted that he never felt the same about playing in Minnesota after that because he felt alone. For the first time in Minnesota, he kind of felt alone and felt that loneliness about, winters in Minnesota are terrible, Joe. They're apt. Like, I don't need to tell you. You and your fam are from Detroit, the D, man. The only place colder than Minnesota in Canada in the wintertime is the D. So it could be, those winters can be brutal on your brain and your mind.
Yeah, I would say maybe it was the tipping point. I never looked at his death as a reason why KG's feelings on Minnesota swayed him to another location. I think ultimately, not to trivialize Malik Sealy's death, but KG was starting to get to that point in his career where if he didn't move out of Minnesota, he was going to end up being Ernie Banks with one playoff run.
Yeah, they just kept running into the Lakers or the Spurs and could never beat them.
And it's the same issues in Minnesota as it was in Cleveland, as it would be in most of these places that are up in the Midwest, that where it is cold, Toronto as well. No one really goes to those places in terms of stars because the system isn't set up to have to go there. If it's the NFL, it's a different story. People have to get their money somewhere, and it's an evenly spaced out process. Whereas in the NBA, you're going to be spending a heck of a lot more time in these places as well, and they'd prefer to go to either LA, Miami, and preferably somewhere in Texas if they because of tax reasons. So you'd have to have next level. You'd have to have next level management, similar to Mr. Presti down in Oklahoma City, to where you can garner enough assets and enough talent and build from within and hopefully hold it this time. That's what Presti has right now that he needs to kind of make up. He had James Harden, he had Kevin Durant, he had Russell Westbrook, and one of the few times in the NBA where you had a young team make it to the finals, especially in the West at that time. Still, the West was a pretty aggressive conference. Yet, for ownership purposes or bad decision purposes, whichever it was, you ended up relinquishing a possible dynasty to the Golden State Warriors because you thought paying James Harden the max was not a good idea. Now, this is a good story to tell about how we feel right now as Laker fans. We're not very happy with D'Angelo Russell because he didn't show up in the playoffs, and we're making an emotional decision there when we should be thinking about the business side of this. The system is set up to where you cannot not sign guys, even though you don't want them. And in this case, those are one of them. And let that be a cautionary tale that because James Harden had a bad 2012 finals, that cost your team likely a dynasty. Because if you just pay James Harden the max and roll with that team for another couple of years, you win a championship. You do win a championship.
Instead, you basically trade James Harden for Steven Adams and flotsam.
Yeah, and you paid Kevin Martin practically the same money on a shorter contract. So I'm like, well, I mean, come on. if you had to drop salary, that's one thing, but you didn't. You just paid it to somebody else on a shorter deal. Well, at least get a damn championship out of it, and maybe you might be able to make up some of that money due to merchandising and playoff home games and things like that. But those decisions, those emotional decisions, those not looking ahead decisions cost you a dynasty, probably, at least a championship. And a championship in Oklahoma City means a heck of a lot more. At least one would mean a heck of a lot more than it would, let's say, in places where they're used to winning championships.
And I'm sure deep down that haunts Sam Presti, Joe, because 3 out of 5 core guys are champions. Kevin Durant, Jeff Green, and Serge Ibaka. It's only Russ and Harden who are yet to win a championship. So I'm sure that plays on Presti in his private moments. I'm sure he thinks about it.
I think Kevin Durant leaving, I think that was the first major mistake. However, things were sort of like, well, we still got Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. We're up 3-1 against the 73-win Golden State Warriors. If you win that game, it's very possible that Oklahoma City goes on to possibly maybe win the championship. Probably not. I don't know 100%. But Presti's really, I don't know if you'll ever be able to make up for this really anyways, is allowing Kevin Durant to leave. What they should have done was they should have traded Russell Westbrook.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would have been able to, he should have sat down Kevin Durant, said, what do you need? What do you want? This is your team. It is Kevin Durant's team. I screwed up the James Harden thing. This didn't work out again. What do you want me to do? Do I trade Russell Westbrook and get you some talent that you feel like you could play with that's more conducive with your skill?
And like you said, Joe, when you make emotional decisions, trying to think rationally, it never works out.
Correct.
Ever.
Yes. And another thing to keep in mind, we sit here and watch the Celtics make a few runs throughout the last 5 years, and our initial response is they need to trade Jaylen Brown. Is Jason Tatum the guy, and all these things, but they've stuck to their guns. And we've commented that if these guys weren't wearing a Celtic uniform, we'd actually be cheering for them, and I would. I like Jason Tatum and I like Jaylen Brown, and they've stuck with those guys. They've let them kind of go through the hardships, much like how the Pistons had to deal with the Celtics during the 80s, much like the Bulls had to deal with the Pistons in the late 80s and 90s. And a lot of times that's what, you should probably do that. Don't just keep flipping things around and trying to improve something when continuity could be a detriment to progress. Continuity is important. It's much harder to keep the continuity, though, a lot of times, especially if certain players want to get paid a certain amount of money and you can't afford it. But for those staples that you do have, those 2 pillars or 3 pillars, you want to make sure you can keep those guys if you can. Right now, the current
chemistry is almost impossible to replicate, though, Joe. You
feel and chemistry, absolutely, yes. It's
like the Lakers made it look easy when Trevor Ariza left and Ron replaced him, but that was more difficult than it looked. I don't think a lot of people truly appreciate how, within the span of a year that Phil and Kobe brought in Ron Artest, got him to understand the triangle in a basic sense, relied on his physicality as a benefit, and instead of being a finesse team that won a championship, they were rough, rugged, and raw. That Kobe made it look easy. It wasn't easy.
I don't. It's always going to sound biased when we explain that latter 2000 Laker team. that particular group does not get enough credit for how great they were.
165 games and a championship. That's really hard to do. It's hard. It's hard to win 65 games in a season in the NBA. They
And
made it look easy.
Two of their losses were last second shots
Yes.
to Indiana and Philly at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They would have won those games like.
And the next season, you win 57 in a crowded field in the Western. Like, you're right, Joe. The history isn't appreciative enough of how difficult and how competitive the Western Conference was those 2 years.
How difficult was it in 2010 after winning a championship? And usually when you win a championship, things kind of relax. And then, of course, you have to replace one of the pillars of the 2009 team, one of the big players, one of the more important X factors in a championship run. You have to play 4 50-win teams on your way to playing a Celtic team that would have won the championship had you not acquired Ron Artest. We'll never know this 100%, but it's hard to argue, even without the definite proof. If Trevor Ariza does not do what he did to force himself out and open the door for Ron Artest, I am sure that Trevor Ariza would not be able to guard Paul Pierce the way Ron Artest did.
Well, remember, Joe, the real kind of flashpoint for Ron Artest's career wasn't the Malice at the Palace. It was when the Pacers swept the Celtics 4 straight. Ron Artest is the only player in NBA history to be on a team that swept the Celtics in a playoff series and beat them for a finals in a 7-game series. He's the only guy who can say that. In the 77 plus years this game has been played, he's the only one. And he shut Paul Pierce down in that series. And he did
all but one game, which if he shuts him down for
plus he had to score 25-30 on the other end.
Right. If he shuts down Paul Pierce for 5 out of the 7 instead of 6 out of the 7, the Lakers lose that series. That's how close these games are. You have to also understand that Celtic team. You're talking about KG in his Defensive Player of the Year mode. Paul Pierce at his peak in terms of his offensive prowess. You had Ray Allen break at that time the finals record for 3-pointers in Game 2, and then you had in his prime Rajon Rondo.
Yeah, 3 Hall of Famers plus playoff Rondo.
And there's some discussion going on that Rondo might be making the Hall of Fame down the road as well. My criteria is different. He's not a Hall of Famer to me, but lately you've been seeing a lot of guys get in that I thought would never get in.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking about and not only did the Lakers do what they did in the finals to them, but after they lost the 2008 finals, it seemed like the Lakers had their number in the regular season and had some epic games in LA and in Boston. There was a switch after Game 6 in 08. There was a switch where you could see that the Lakers just played the Celtics at a different level, and it always seemed like the Lakers got over on them at that point. And it's just that when you know the history and you've seen all this basketball, the what ifs a lot of times are just good discussions. It's what ifs. There's nothing to lose. There's nothing to gain from it, right? And right now, the what if is starting to creep a little bit towards the Celtics. This current Celtics team is: will they be a what if? Should they not win it this year? Will the Denver Nuggets be that Jokic dynasty? if they go back to back. We're going to need them or Minnesota or Dallas or Oklahoma City to do something here to avoid what's coming out east, which I believe is going to be the Celtics. Although I will say this, I am going to give the Knicks a little bit of some room here too, should they beat Indiana, which I think they will. I think the Knicks have a very good team. I know they're a little injured right now, but I would like to think that I don't think it's going to be an easy series for Boston. And if a couple things go the Knicks' way, especially with someone like Brunson who's been scoring like Jordan and Kobe in their primes, there could be something there, especially with how the East usually plays. There's a lot of upsets. There's a lot of teams that shouldn't winning these kind of series.
If OG comes back, Joe, that's a different series.
Will he be effective though if he comes back?
Probably not, because we know soft tissue injuries usually take weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah, and you also have that same issue with Porzingis. So does that even out? Hey, Gerald, welcome.
That's tough, man. That's tough, because the only reason I'm going to say Boston would have the advantage is because I think Brown, Tatum, and Derek White are just a little bit better than the Villanova triplets. But if Dante DiVincenzo gets hot from three, that could be an equalizer too. Because, like you said, Joe, no Porzingis, Hartenstein is just killing teams on the offensive boards. Gerald, Boston really doesn't have an answer for Hartenstein in the front court if Porzingis' calf is pooched.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Sean. But maybe if you pop in and out, Sean, something's going on with your levels because they're just
Okay.
like off the chart. Yeah, you're in the red all the time. If it was like an audio meter going on, you'd be like in the ultra red right now. I don't know what happened because you were just sounding just fine during playback.
Go ahead, pop in and out, Sean.
Yeah,
I'll
maybe that's
continue our discussion here.
Yeah.
The
We are reading the chat, Kenny.
Yeah.
We're getting this taken care of. That's why I'm on the air. I'm trying to help you guys out here. So.
the interest for me in enjoying the end results of this playoff run would be different if the Knicks beat the Celtics. Should the Knicks beat Indiana, it takes on a whole new kind of feel. A lot of what the Knicks have done, and the person who's at the helm there with Tom Thibodeau. I am a huge Tom Thibodeau fan, and to see him win a championship would, in a lot of ways, solidify his philosophy in an era where we're told that his philosophy is not valued, much like Bruce Bochy going to Texas and helping them win a World Series. And that part is intriguing to me. And that's intriguing to me. So, Sean, I was just explaining that I'm comparing the Knicks situation where if they were to go to the finals, let's say they beat Indiana and then they upset the Celtics. That takes on a whole different look now in terms of how I'm approaching the final result of this season's champion. I'm actually going to cheer for the Knicks because I want Tom Thibodeau to be validated in an era where his philosophy is not necessarily supported. It's usually the soft coach who doesn't want to play his guys too much because they're worried about getting hurt or saving things up. It would be similar to how Bruce Bochy came into Texas within 9 months and helped them win a championship when they've been underachievers for years because of all the money spent and not being able to put it together. Because why? Well, are these guys not just going for it? Are they skating on thin ice? Just go for it. I just play. Yes, we know, because I keep hearing it all the time. Are you going to burn your guys out like Pat Riley and the Miami Heat do? Well, no. They're not going to burn out. The difference between that and what I'm talking about is the Miami Heat in 2020 and the Miami Heat in 2023 lost the finals because their talent was less than the teams they played. It wasn't because they got tired in the end, but it wasn't because they just ran those guys ragged. It wouldn't have mattered. They would have lost those guys. It was just a small part of why they ended up losing. But ultimately, it was a talent deficiency that Miami had in both finals, and they ended up getting beat because of it. So yes, my monkey wrench in this East thing is I want the Knicks to win it. Not because I want the Celtics to not win. I actually want to see a team that's played, in my eyes, very similar to how we kind of want teams to play, with a coach that allows his team to play a certain way, kind of the old school Big East attitude, atmosphere. It's really cool that the Villanova boys are there with this old school coach. It's in New York. It's in Madison Square Garden. I want that to mean something again. And I think it just would be cool to see the Knicks, especially with Jalen Brunson, not necessarily being that guy that Knicks fans were hoping for to take over as the one spot. They were waiting for Dame Lillard. They were waiting for Durant. They were waiting for LeBron. How fitting would it be that a guy like Jalen Brunson, a New York guy, ends up coming home, and then here you are, finally after 51 years, not only winning the championship, but winning it New York style. Now, New York style is an interesting phrase. Gerald, don't shit a brick here. Just talking what's going on. Okay? New York's gotten a little soft. No one's going to argue against that, especially New Yorkers. This would help that a little, I should say.
Harden them up a little.
Harden it back up.
You sound much better, Sean.
Harden it up. New York, come back, please. You guys are tough. No more
Alan and
soft
Doobie
stuff.
are somewhere. They're just like driving along East Coast right now near New York, and they're just like, did Joe just give us a smack?
Alan's probably eating a whole Costco chicken in his car.
I've been to New York many times. Love the city. If I was not married and was a
man about town,
I could live in New York. I could live in New York and Chicago. I could live in those two cities and be very comfortable.
Joe, you look like a Chicago guy, I gotta say.
I was shocked at how much I loved Chicago. Now, I was there in August, so maybe I got it easy at that time because it wasn't humid and it wasn't cold. I was there for a week.
Maybe it's because I'm getting a lot of, enthusiasms.
Little enthusiasm. Yeah, that would make sense. But
you need to have chemistry. You need a great baseball team needs great chemistry.
Because you've seen it with the Yankees too. You've seen some softness there.
Oh boy,
with Steinbrenner Jr. over there. I don't know what he's doing over there, but he's not like.
Seems like they only care about how many Yankee hats they sell, not how many trophies they've
turned. Yeah, and that's what happens, folks. When the privilege, so the privileged part is when the patriarch or the matriarch are the ones that have the story of how they were in soup lines and then built their empire. Well, at some point when a person or persons creates this empire and have children, the children are never going to live desperate like they did. They become softer because of that. You would have to have a certain communication, a certain mindset where you put your children in rough spots as they get older and they don't know any better. The problem is it's much harder now to do that because of the information age. Doesn't matter how hard you push them, they're never really going to really taste desperate. You can't mimic, oh, by the way, you're not going to eat salads this week. You're going to eat cornbread and beans because you need to learn a lesson. The brain doesn't work like that. It's not. They're going to know it's just a ploy. So naturally, things get softer as the families are more privileged. So you have to almost implement that toughness to yourself. You have to kind of create that toughness, like let's say Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant didn't grow up. He grew up with a father who was a professional athlete who was doing well for himself at the time and was able to go to Europe and live in Europe and get culturalized and all that and come back. And, a lot of people don't have that option, and he was able to do that. However, Kobe did develop this kind of work ethic that almost mimicked desperation. It's hard to do that, man, when you're privileged. Privileged as in, and I consider myself privileged, even though my parents didn't have money. I'm privileged in that if my parents don't leave where they left, I'd probably be dead right now.
Well, it's rare, Joe, and I'll post this article either tonight or later on, but there's a comparison between Mozart and Kobe and the way both of them practice their craft. And you're talking about, like you said, privilege. Both those guys came from privilege, yet you couldn't question either one's work ethic. One was writing sonatas at the age of 10. The other one was, an NBA level basketball player at age 15. So, and it kind of brings us full circle here. Gerald, Joe, in a word or two, why do you we don't need to get into the weeds? Why did the Golden State Warriors defeat the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals, Gerald?
I just thought when it came right down to it, they just
Curry outplayed Tatum.
Yeah, but they also had the experience where it counted. And then as much as you hate him, and as much as we don't like him either, Draymond Green, I mean, you could see from one game to the next, he was a non-factor at times in that series. But when he did come to play, when you got the best of Draymond Green, that's when they achieved their best success. And that was one of the differences. Of course, you saw Curry, like you said, Curry outplayed Tatum.
So Gerald's talking about the scar tissue built up that the Warriors had through defeats and victories, and they were able
to experience
the moment. Yeah,
they just had the experience. That I think is one of the.
I don't think so, because I watched. I've watched teams that still won.
Do you think Curry outplayed Tatum in the series? Superstar, mono.
Yes, and what happened with Tatum and Jaylen Brown was they couldn't make shots in that series. Tatum especially. Draymond Green actually almost cost them that series from what I saw. He was absolutely horrid, actually.
It depends on the game. Some games he was.
I didn't see any benefit in any of those 6 games.
Here's what I would say with all of with Boston having a Porzingis issue. Here's what I'll say, Joe. Do you think that in a 7-game series, Jason Tatum can outplay Nikola Jokic?
No.
Gerald?
No one can right now.
Oh, no. No, dear God, no.
See, this is kind of what I mean when I'm talking about, Tatum is a superstar, but he's not a superstar in the sense of a Kobe or an AI. He's not a killer. He can lift a team up. He could do that, but it's hard for him to meet the moment when he's mano a mano against another superstar. He hasn't. It's like in Street Fighter 2, right, Gerald? In Street Fighter 2, at the end, you have to beat M. Bison. You beat M. Bison, you win Street Fighter. You don't beat M. Bison, you have to start all over again. And Jason Tatum hasn't beaten M. Bison in the NBA. He just hasn't. And that's why I think...
Let's hope it stays that way, Magic Man.
Yeah, let's hope so. Because this is what I'm talking about when I say I don't consider Jason Tatum like a superstar in the way that Kobe or AI or Steph Curry is that he hasn't met the moment yet. He hasn't brought the insane intensity and the product. And as Joe said, he hasn't made the shots, like shot for shot. Like, does Gerald? We lost that game in the Washington Garden when Kobe scored 20 straight points in the third. Do you remember that sequence, Gerald?
Yes.
Do you remember that? That was a man possessed. He was possessed. Like, Meta World Peace, at that time he was still Ron Artest, was turning down wide open shots, Joe, and passing it out to him because he knew Kobe wasn't going to miss. And do you remember what Dwayne Wade's reaction? His two kids are there playing video games.
Yeah, he was like, had a water bottle in his head. He's like,
and he's just shaking his head because he's amazed. He's in awe of what he's seeing. Jason Tatum hasn't had that moment yet. I don't think he ever will. He might. I don't think he ever will because I don't think that stuff is in him like it was in Kobe and AI and Steph to meet the moment and just blank out.
yeah, it's.
I mean, we lost the game. We lost
round,
the game, but we weren't going to lose that series. After that game, I knew there was no way Kobe was going to allow the Lakers to
when
lose.
we saw them blow them out in Game 6, when they came back and blew them out in Game 6, I go, this is the second blowout in 6 games. I go, you guys know how to beat this team. Now, the problem in Game 7 was Kobe pressed too much.
So did Powell, but Ron was there in the first quarter.
Powell's rebounding, though.
Yep.
My God, his offensive rebounding was absolutely destructive to the Celtics. And
Kobe won MVP of the series. Meta World Peace deserved the MVP of Game 7, Gerald. He kept us in that game with his offensive rebounding, 4 big ones in the first quarter, and he did his darndest to try and because you're right, Joe. Kobe was pressing, but so was Pierce. Pierce was pressing.
I think they were just tired, and KG confirmed this. When I've seen that game from beginning to end, the fourth quarter at least probably 20 or 30 times, and you could see it. The reason why you could see it is because they kept fouling towards the end. They didn't have anything left. It took everything. As funny as this sounds, those 2 championship teams were extremely underrated. And that sounds weird to say with a Kobe-led team with a Hall of Fame player like Pau Gasol and an amazing 6th Man of the Year glue guy like Lamar Odom. But my God, it took everything out of that Celtic team that was veteran savvy, tough, smart, effective, clutch, young, old, everything. It took everything and it wasn't enough. And that's one of those games where even if the Lakers hadn't won, you just watch that game and you go, wow, that's how you know each team wrung out every drop of liquid in that towel. And the thing with Kobe, what separates, and this unfortunately is a negative for Kobe, the difference between Kobe and Michael Jordan was, if you needed to explain the difference, was that game. Kobe was too much on himself sometimes. He was too much on himself. Whereas Michael Jordan was able to go and just
take a deep breath.
Right.
Meditate.
Why? I think Michael Jordan learned something at North Carolina that took him to that level. Dean Smith sacrificed national championships so that he can teach young men how to really be good men.
James Worthy also probably sacrificed a player of the year.
You just gave me goosebumps, Sean, because I was going to get to that. Okay. James Worthy, the first pick overall in 1982. Okay. You're coming into a team already that has two of the greats, and never in the 12 seasons he played, 13 seasons, I believe. Was it 13?
Mhm.
No, 12.
12.
That you got an inkling of an ego or an issue or a complaint. Yet, when things got tight, why is James Worthy big game James?
Because
Why?
every time Magic or Kareem struggled against the Celtics, they
Every
couldn't
time
answer.
playoff time came and they put their focus on Magic and Kareem, Worthy was there. And so much so that in that Detroit series, and you have Dennis Rodman, who was able to contain the Shaqs of the world, the Alonzo Mournings of the world, guys that were 10 times bigger than, but for some
A twitchy
reason,
wing gave him fits.
there, I heard a quote years ago. Again, I don't know if it's true, but I remember reading, I hate guarding that effing guy. So if you have Dennis Rodman going, God, I can't stand guarding James Worthy, that's how you know how great James Worthy was. And his greatness wasn't in numbers. It wasn't in being a third, second, whatever guy on a team. It was the fact that this guy showed up in big games because he knew at that moment, he goes, guys, they're going to hound on you. Get me the ball and let me do my turnaround one hand dunk on these mother you know what's, and let's go win some championships. And of course, James Worthy, much like Ron Artest in 2010, you don't win an 88 without James Worthy. His triple-double, 30-point triple-double, only triple-double he ever had in his career at the best time in Game 7, and then, pretty much solidifying his Hall of Fame career because of that game. So, yeah, when your team is not in it, you look for a story. There's a lot of things going on right now that are negative with the Lakers situation, and right now it's because we don't have a coach. The other is we are now 8 wins away from possibly the Celtics winning a championship, negating the 2020 championship to a degree, because now they're going to be one title behind again should they win it. So we have to hope that doesn't happen. And at the same time, can we get a good story? Because I think at Denver, other than the Celtics not winning a championship, the story is pretty dull. So that's why I would like to see the Knicks beat the Celtics should they beat Indiana. And now we can watch the finals and go, how cool would it be if, after all this stuff going on, after all the negativity in New York with James Dolan, and why did you get Tom Thibodeau? He's going to run his guys ragged and they're going to end up crashing. How fitting would it be that all those concerns would go down the toilet, especially with the one player they have, the number one player, not being the nice, shiny thing that everybody wanted.
The only thing I would say to that is Dolan needs to make things right with Oakley and just invite him back. If he doesn't come back, that's on Oak. But you need to make that situation right.
James Dolan is who he is. I'm sure Charles Oakley would probably go, he's probably just doing that for publicity. And he probably would be.
No, he probably would, but Oak is a forgive and forget kind of guy. Other than
I don't know. I don't know.
Other than if you're Charles Barkley, he would put for the city of New York. He would put it behind.
Honestly, I don't think it matters. I mean, with all due respect to Charles Oakley, he's not Patrick Ewing. He's not Walt Frazier. He's not Dave DeBusschere. God rest his soul. He's not any of those guys. He's a pillar.
That's kind of funny. That name is French, and in Canada it would be pronounced Dubashir.
It's just like Benoit Benjamin, right?
Benoit, yeah.
Now, when I was growing up, Benoit Benjamin was a player for New Jersey, and they called him Benoit. Then I remember seeing Chris Benoit in wrestling.
Yes.
And I go, Benoit, why? Oh, so they're saying it the French way. Benoit looks, why don't they say Benoit? Benjamin instead of Benoit. And then I realized, wait a minute. So French Canadian, okay, yeah, he's
Yeah, exactly. Like
yeah.
Mark Dagnall.
And then there was
he called Dagnall.
there was a
called
funny
Daniel.
there was a funny skit on In Living Color where Tommy Davidson plays Spike Lee, and he goes, there's a scene where he's like, Joy, and then Joy's, oh, what? Joy, what? Joy, what? Come here. She's like, my name isn't Joy, it's Joie. And he's like, you're in Brooklyn, all right? You're Joy, not Joie. It's not Sade, it's Sadie. So he started getting the lingo on the different.
That was so funny.
Yeah,
That was so funny.
Gagne, right? Gagne. There was a professional baseball player named Gagne. Yet when we got, wow, just drew a blank. Our pitcher.
Yeah, Eric Gagne.
Eric Gagne. So it's spelled the French way, Gagne. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, why did I hear all the English translations growing up and now everything's going French? So yeah. So that's kind of how that goes. But
like Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert.
Gobert. I call him Yogurt.
You know what? Until he gets to an NBA Finals while winning Defensive Player of the Year, he's Gobert. He's no longer Gobert.
Well, the other day
Gobert.
he looked like Gobert, and today he looked like Gobert.
And I'm going to answer some questions here. Sorry, guys, if I wasn't quick on the questions. I've been our normal window here doesn't show you guys' comments. I have to switch over to YouTube. But let me get to some of the questions that are being asked here. Southern Comfort says, Joe, don't leave LFB for ESPN. Guys, there's a better chance of me growing a third leg than ever being on ESPN. If you had said that in the 90s, I would have said, sorry, guys, I'm going to ESPN, because that place was a freaking palace at that time. Greatest era of sportscasting by the best sportscasters that have ever lived in my eyes was in the 90s.
Cool personalities.
Yes, cool personalities and talented and execution and everything. Endorphin, Joe, what are your thoughts on Stephen A. Smith? I've always wondered about your position. Stephen A. Smith is hot and cold for me. I don't dislike him and I don't like him at the same time. He's just kind of like, nah. I think there's I've said this to Gerald. I think there's just like athletes, I think there's a timeline on when a sportscaster should hang it up because the shtick gets old. Now, that's just me because Jim Rome is still around.
Mad Dog.
His shtick is...
Doug Gottlieb, but he's going to coach and still do his show.
Guys like Jim Rome, guys like Mad Dog, although I can handle Mad. I feel like Mad Dog has a little bit more diversification in his stuff. He comes out with his Mad Dog thing every once in a while. It's not constant. Whereas Jim Rome is still, what's that? Incredible. Amazing. War Eagle, war this, war. Like, I hadn't seen a show in a few years up until maybe about a year ago. And I saw him, on CBS Sports.
Welcome to the jungle, baby.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, it's the same damn show. So Stephen A. Smith to me is that guy that's kind of it's
Call me Chris one more time.
Yeah, that was a pretty good show, by the way. I remember watching that. But yeah, I'm indifferent. I guess the word indifferent in terms of Stephen A. Smith. I would have liked Joe Soro over Rob P. I'm assuming that's Rob Parker.
By the way, Joe, that was kind of the only time Jim Everett ever showed leadership.
I think if they didn't run into the dynasty of the Niners, I think they would have gone to a Super Bowl with Jim Everett back in the late 80s, but that's just me. Gerald and Sean in the back pocket. I'm not a fan of Rob Parker. He's not as bad as that pencil neck piece of shit Nick Wright, but he's pretty close.
Nick Wright wears hair plugs.
He is a hair plug. His whole existence is a hair plug to me. He's a piece of shit, and yeah. But anyways, yeah, Rob Parker, not my not really my cup of tea. Chris Broussard, his partner, he's kind of indifferent too. I don't really dislike him. Doesn't do anything for me either. One of my favorite non-talked about sports guys right now, especially in the NBA, is Dennis Scott. I would love to do an NBA show with Dennis Scott. As a matter of fact, if I ever had a chance to host an NBA show on NBA TV, I would say I need Dennis Scott on my show. And of course, Sean and Gerald. Because that guy is just, I just love his knowledge, his delivery, he just knows what he's saying. And I just love guys that know what they're doing.
Yeah, there are certain fly on the wall moments in NBA history that have gone through in my head. Like, would you want to be a fly on the wall in that moment? And Dennis Scott's involvement is one of them. That brawl that the Orlando Magic had, where Scotty Skiles picked a fight with Shaquille O'Neal, that's a fly on the wall moment for me. Like, Scotty Skiles and Gerald, this is fact, it's on the record, Scotty Skiles like the booger sugar in Michigan State and beyond. I think that was helping Scott Skiles build up the courage to walk up to a 7-foot, 23-year-old Shaquille O'Neal and just punch him right in the face.
Okay.
That's a fly on the wall. That story really hasn't. We haven't heard the truth about that. Scott Skiles hasn't told the truth about that. Brian Hill hasn't told the truth about that. Joe would get the truth out of Dennis Scott.
M24, he was referring to Rob Pelinka, not Rob.
So I'm sorry, Mission. I saw an article with Rob Parker earlier today, and I assumed it was something that involved that. You would elect me over Rob Pelinka in a quick second. The problem, guys, is unless I was working with, let's say, I would be better off in Miami. I would probably work better in Miami than I would in LA. I would have to be
George Sedano.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Riley, working under someone like Pat Riley, I think I'm more of that ilk. Matter of fact, Pat Riley would probably be killing me, even when I'm.
Nah, you would be buddies. You would be buddies.
But it'd be one of those things where he knew he could press it, and in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. I prefer the Heat. Not as a favorite team, still love the Lakers, but in terms of culture, it's probably a better spot.
Hey, they got palm trees. They got nice palm trees in Miami, Joe.
But there's one problem in that Florida area. I don't like watching sports at 10 o'clock at night. Not at the beginning.
I thought you were going to say the bugs.
No, the bugs, you figure that out. Your body acclimates to the mosquitoes, all that stuff. I'm talking about, I love watching Monday Night Football because I obviously don't have anyone to answer to in my profession. So I have the freedom to watch a Monday Night Football game and then go out and have a drink with friends. Whereas in the East Coast, you got to go to bed. Because by the time you're done watching that game, it's 1 o'clock?
Come on, Bramford, we're just getting started.
Not the guys I'm around anymore. Now everybody falls asleep at like 8. A bunch of old geezers.
Sean, I'm sorry. Lawrence has got to go first before Ireland. I'm sorry. Lawrence is worse than Ireland.
Lawrence?
Joel Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean the TV guy.
Oh,
Bill McDonald. Bill McDonald. Sorry.
Oh,
Bill McDonald. Yes,
Joe,
Bill,
final season for Mike
I think
Tomlin.
Gerald
Given
was thinking of Joel Myers. And he
Joel
said
Myers. Yeah,
Myers.
Joel Myers was good, but Bill McDonald. Bill
Bill
McDonald is
McDonald's got to
bad.
go. No,
Bill
I agree,
McDonald's got to
Gerald.
go before.
McDonald before Ireland.
so,
Yes.
Is it Jiken? Jikan? Jiken, right? Jiken is asking final season for Mike Tomlin, given the 2024 tough schedule, still no franchise QB,
Here we
and
go.
potential no playoffs in 2025. Unfortunately, Jiken, word around the campfire is an extension for Mike Tomlin is imminent. Anytime between now and June. We're not going to see Mike Tomlin go anywhere. The Rooney family loves Mike Tomlin. And yeah, that's likely what's going to happen. Now, I would prefer him to not be extended and let him play out his contract, but they usually don't do that with coaches with a year left. They usually re-sign. The only time they'll address a contract before a 1 year remaining on the contract is a quarterback. But it's unlikely that we're going to see a different coach. And I when Ben Johnson did not go to Washington, there was that like, oh, really? But I'm like, oh, they're gonna let me sign Mike Tomlin. Because I was like, okay, let Mike Tomlin play out this
By
season.
the way, that took a lot of chutzpah, don't you think, Gerald?
What's
all these rich billionaires are getting on their bird, flying out to see you, interviewing you for the head coaching job, and in the middle of the flight, you get a fax that says, "Nope, I'm good in Detroit."
Oh yeah.
Joe, that might have cost him a head coaching job in the future.
No one who was able to resurrect Jared Goff.
If Detroit has an 8-9 or a 7-10 season, Gerald, you can bet there won't be calls for Ben Johnson.
I thought you were busy getting an Ohtani bobblehead today, Joe.
They were handing those out at the game.
Yeah. First 40,000 people get. That's why I guess there was.
How many Dodger games have you been to so far, Joe?
None, but I will be going for the Boston game in July.
They're going up already for $1,000 on eBay.
I don't go to games for merch. I don't want stuff. I want less stuff in my life.
Okay, well, just tell you. Just
yeah,
ask.
I have a Walker Bueller bobblehead that I still haven't unwrapped.
Bueller.
Well, put it up on eBay, man. Get rid of it. You said you didn't want your stuff anyways.
No.
So I'm just going to lose.
Let me answer some more questions here from our esteemed panels. Joe's really picking Miami because of the women. Don't be fooled. Blue Magic, if I wasn't in Southern California, that might make sense, but there's a lot of beautiful women in Southern California too.
JSJ says predict their Steelers record, Joe.
9-8.
Make or miss?
They'll make because there's 7 teams in the playoffs now. I don't trust Justin Fields. As far as Russell Wilson, he's going to be checked down, Wilson. You're going to see a lot of running, and you're going to see a lot of defense and a lot of conservative type play. The problem is you play Kansas City and these high octane quarterbacks, you're toast. But it does. I saw the Steelers' last 5 seasons in terms of their strength of schedule. They've been playing pretty much top 5 schedules the whole time. And in 2008, when they won the Super Bowl, they had, at that time, one of the most aggressive schedules in the history of the NFL. And they ended up going 12-4 and winning the Super Bowl that year, which still to this day,
a prime Big Ben.
Still to this day was the most enjoyable football season I've ever watched.
That was Big Ben in his prime.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the 2010 team was great too. I just wish they hadn't cut Santonio Holmes. I wish they would have let him. I wish they would have dealt with him a little bit longer. I would have liked to have seen him in that Super Bowl on that last drive because I think that he would have helped. I never really trusted Mike Wallace. He was too diva, and he didn't really
Proved to be.
If he had the step on you, sure, and you got him the ball where you wanted it, he was great. But he never went the extra mile. And I think had they had Santonio in that Super Bowl, I think they might have had a better chance at extending that last drive and maybe winning it all. But anyways, Steelers are in a lot of ways kind of like the Lakers in that they're in purgatory. They're in that middle ground area. They never seem to suck bad enough to turn it around. Although in the NFL it's a little different. You can still be in the middle pack, and just one acquisition or one draft pick can change everything. And that, of course, would likely be a quarterback. Now, I'm not upset that they didn't draft a quarterback in this draft because I actually believe that this is going to be bust city for almost all the quarterbacks that were drafted except for one. I think one is going to come out of that situation and come out okay.
I have a prediction about that, Joe. We've heard rumblings and sort of seen the tea leaves that the NBA has already experienced a player who doesn't reach the full max 7 years with the team that drafted him, and he either walks or he's traded. My guess is that one guy you're talking about is the one guy who pulls the first abort button in the NFL, and he walks away from the team that drafted him to greener pastures. And if I had to make an educated guess about that, I would say it'd be Jaden Daniels. Because I don't think he's going to like playing for the Commanders.
Probably, but it's very difficult for a quarterback that is actually good.
I know it'd be unprecedented, but there's already been whispers about this with agents in the NFL, Joe, that it's going to be one. There needs to be the one that makes the move first.
I think I know where you're going with this because there is a path that can be followed already in the Kirk Cousins situation.
Mm-hmm.
This thing with Atlanta wasn't the first time he's done this. He did this when he went from the Redskins to Minnesota. So what he did,
to be fair to him, they franchised him twice.
Right. And he took back that power by doing what he did.
F you.
And you're not going to keep me here, which was kind of a stupid decision. And I know Kirk Cousins is kind of what's a good. He's kind of the Tony Romo of this era, but it's either Tony Romo, Kirk Cousins, or who would be a good pick in terms of, or you're looking at the tail end of Russell Wilson's career. Or Justin Fields. It's like, well, I'd rather have Kirk Cousins or Tony Romo at that point.
Yeah,
Dak Prescott's another guy. Dak Prescott's another guy where you're kind of
Sophie's choice. That's good, Joe. Cousins' choice.
But the problem with Dallas,
and you just signed Goff to a $200 million extension,
and that's how they get you, right? If you're a quarterback that's viable,
$180 million,
you're going to get $200 million to stay. Look what Geno Smith got in Seattle after one good year. He didn't get the big contract, but somebody making $20 million is a lot of money for someone like Geno Smith who was benched for 9 years. I think Pete Carroll at that point got into the Hall of Fame just for resurrecting Geno Smith's career. But he was already going to go anyways. But the point is, it's sometimes the system helps, right? Does Patrick Mahomes become as great as he is in Chicago under Mike Nagy? Now Nagy came from
because for a long time in the NBA, Joe, there was never a thought that a player at the peak of their abilities would walk away from the team that drafted them, and then Shaq happened.
Oh man, the NFL
and that kind of that changed the way athletes thought about their playing career. It really did. Shaq not only changed the Lakers, Gerald, he changed the landscape of an athlete's power that they have in free agency.
You don't think it was Glenn Robinson?
I don't. I think it was Shaq. Do you agree, Gerald, or disagree?
Glenn's was very important for the time, just like Curt Flood. I mean, Curt Flood never was the, elite player, but look what Curt Flood did to stimulate the baseball marketplace.
Right.
And coincidentally, when it comes to Glenn Robinson, look what he did to stimulate with his free agency, the basketball marketplace, which led to, of course, what happened with Shaq. But Shaq is going to be the biggest name around that time to maybe accentuate what you're saying, Magic Man. But I don't know. I'd lean towards
it was
Alonzo Mourning too, shifting from Charlotte to Miami.
Yes, very
and then
similar.
Reggie White in football, going
very
from
very similar. I think that the difference in that in all those scenarios is that it took the Heat a couple years after Zoe got there before they finally became a contender. And Gerald, do you know the story with Flood? Robinson individually, yeah, he changed the landscape, but Shaq really had his cake and ate it too. And I think that's what separates his situation from all the rest is that Jerry West gave him what he wanted contractually. He gave him what he wanted when it comes to roster decisions and personnel. He was cool sharing the spotlight with Kobe Bean Bryant. He was cool with Dr. Buss. And that kind of opened up people's eyes to thinking, I can't have my cake and eat it too. The decision was different in the sense that Shaq had already done something like that. He just didn't make it a dog and pony show the way ESPN, Jim Gray, and LeBron
the reason why
made it.
the Shaq situation, I don't put that in the same category really, because it's too. At the time, I remember at the time, all I could think about is get Shaq to LA, and when you heard $120 million, 121 to be exact, it wasn't like, wow, oh my God, he's getting 121. It was more shock that the Orlando papers said no to him getting at that time, I think it was
they were only offering
a 7-year, $90 million contract or a 6-year, $90 million contract.
Shaq says they offered him 4 for 57.
So 4 for 57, and then the papers said no to 90.
Mm-hmm. The papers said no to 90.
Right.
The Magic didn't offer him 90.
And then what ended up happening was, my guess off of what I saw in the documentary about Penny and Shaq was, at that time, the GM, Gabriel, he called Shaq after he had signed and said, can we? And Shaq's like, no, I already signed the new deal. So it sounded like he might be playing it out. Just to save face. But I think they might have said, oh, crap, he actually did get this. And then that's why you started seeing the viciousness towards Jerry West because those guys were all upset that
Well, nearly died.
Jerry West takes things professionally very, very, very well, or I should say, not well. And if you call Jerry West if you say that Jerry West is doing something he's not, he's gonna take it very
Personally.
hard. Personally, that's the competitive. You can look at that as a soft thing, or you can look at it as a competitor thing. Like I think I know Jerry West based off how I've seen his personality develop in the years I've watched him. I think that was more of a mother. I just whooped your, you know what, and you want to do this to me? Okay. What did Jerry West say? You never lie to a player. You never lie to a player. He didn't lie to Shaq, and he said, Shaq, I can't get you 150. I can get you 120. And by the way, he could have gotten him 140. He would have had to have gotten rid of Eldon Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I'm sure the discussion was there. Look, do you want a team here, or you just want Shaq and a couple of guards? So Shaq took the deal and created the greatest dynasty I've seen in my Laker life as an observer, right?
And Joe, let's not forget something, okay? I'm not going to use... I almost used the wrong word, Joe, but I caught myself. Tim Duncan saw what was going on, Joe. He was still in college, but he saw what was going on. And when he had an opportunity in free agency, Joe, the Magic, Gerald and you'll remember this, they had Grant Hill. And who else, Joe? Tracy McGrady, right there. And Tim Duncan was a blank hair away from going to Orlando and signing with the Magic. And he often talks about he saw what happened with Shaq. Shaq got exactly what he wanted from Jerry West and
Henry.
Lakers. And the Magic were willing to give Tim Duncan whatever he wanted to, Joe. This close. Tim Duncan, Grant Hill.
It turned out it wouldn't have mattered, Sean, because Grant Hill was never able to stay healthy. So
it wouldn't have, but at the time, context matters. It was this close. He was just about ready to sign.
And we're looking at a team that, well, do you hear why he didn't sign with Orlando?
Yes.
Do you believe that story?
No, I do not.
I don't believe it either. I believe that Tim Duncan stayed in San Antonio because ultimately he knew his Buford and Pop were head and shoulders above anything Orlando had, and while Tracy McGrady would have been a better teammate than anyone he's ever had, and of course Grant Hill, without even knowing he made the right call, because if Grant Hill's not on that team and healthy, he regrets that choice. Now they could have went and got somebody else, I guess, with him and McGrady, but I think he made the right call. And if Popovich doesn't have his worst coaching in those last couple of games,
he pulled an opposite of Ken Griffey Jr. Cincinnati convinced Griffey that they had everything lined up for him.
Mm-hmm.
See the team we got, see the pitching we got. Sign with us, you're a contender. And it was never the same, man. Like if you asked, so beyond your generation is mine. Mine's the next one, the millennials. If you asked most millennials, who's your favorite athlete of the 90s, Gerald? You'd get one of 4 answers. Magic Johnson, Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, Ken Griffey Jr. Most of those people would say one of the 4. And for me, it was Bo. But Ken Griffey, like Joe says, Ken Griffey Jr. is the greatest athlete that's ever played baseball. The way he could run, the way he could throw, the way he could leap, the way he could catch.
Sweetest swing probably ever. You look at Ken Griffey's, there was a 3-year run, and it was in the middle of the steroid apex. I mean, I think about this when we talk about that era. We're talking 97, 98, 99, that last 3 years in the 90s. Man, that was a great 3 years too. He hit 56, 56, and 48 home runs. Won the MVP in 97 in the AL. His numbers were comparable with steroid users in that era. And not a lot of people talk about that. Yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. People know who Ken Griffey is. But just think about that for a second. Let's say if Ken Griffey juiced during that time, would he have had 80 home runs?
That's crazy to think about, actually.
Think about that. This guy was hitting close to 60 home runs and 50 home runs in the like bowels of the steroid era. And he went to Cincinnati. Why? Sure, Cincinnati said, we're going to try to compete. We have this, we have that. But this is a family man. Wanted to play for his pops' team, the Big Red Machine. How cool would it be if I won a championship in Cincinnati? Like my dad. Yeah, I was a Barry Bonds guy. I know that sounds weird.
Well, it's a different era, Joe. But Barry really popped in the
I was a fan of Barry
80s.
before 98. I was always a fan because I don't know, I just got this.
Like when he was a Pirate.
Yeah, when he was a Pirate, because I don't know, it's something about the way he did things clicked, and it's hilarious too because it's confirmed because my buddy Adam is really tight with Barry, and they're buddies, and he tells me about Barry and how his personality is, and I go, yeah, even when I was a kid, I saw it before I even knew what it was. Will Clark, again, these are giants, and I'm a Dodger fan. And people did not understand because people hated Barry, not just Dodger fans. I'm talking to everybody because he was kind of a dick. But maybe that was kind of my personality even before I became what I became. Will Clark is a man's man. He can come off kind of like aggressive and kind of, even though he's much more down to earth than Barry in a lot of ways. Barry Bonds, I was talking to my boy Adam. I was like, you're hanging out with Michael Jordan, right? Like that's Michael Jordan. Barry Bonds is Michael Jordan with a bat. That's a different level. As great as Will Clark was.
Did you enjoy the movie The Fan, Joe?
I did.
Okay, all right.
I did enjoy it because I was a huge De Niro fan. I was a huge Wesley Snipes fan. Do
you think he was a better psycho in The Fan?
No, Cape Fear.
Cape
He
Fear,
was
yeah.
unreal in Cape Fear.
Yeah.
That actually might be my favorite De Niro movie.
Max Cady.
It's easy to say Goodfellas and Casino, but
he played a psycho.
I resonated with Max Cady, with that character, and De Niro more because I really truly believe this was before I watched Raging Bull. So
really,
that had an impression. Yeah, I didn't watch Raging Bull till later in the 90s.
Right. Okay,
I didn't watch Raging Bull when in the early 90s. I watched Cape Fear. That performance, especially in the end, after you'd gotten burnt.
Counselor.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. That was argumentative. Like that the candle
Oh my
and it
god.
melting. The line, loss of humanity. Like, I can't use that line now. I love it so much. And there's so many things you can use that line for. And I can't use it now because they're like, hey, man, you stole that from Cape Fear. I'm like, damn it, that's a great line. Loss of humanity. You know, regardless. Okay, anytime you can get sympathy from a psychopathic rapist, that's how you know somebody can act. That's the scary part. That was the precursor of Tony Soprano, the characters of Tony Soprano and Walter White and Dom Draper and all these guys. Those characters started emerging in film.
You could make an argument Scorsese's Cape Fear was better than the original with Gregory Peck.
That was a favor too.
Robert Mitchum.
That was a favor to the studio. He that's not a Scorsese film. Much like Color of Money, was it, right? I don't know why he did Color of Money. He had mentioned
Paul Newman. That's why.
Right? Paul Newman won an Oscar, his only Oscar in that
Wouldn't
movie.
You want to work with Paul Newman?
Okay,
Joe?
so hear this out, right? So one of my favorite documentaries is the Roger Ebert documentary.
I don't know who's cooler either, Paul Newman or Steve McQueen. I keep debating.
You can't. There's no. They're both cool. There's nothing. There's like it's like saying, well, who's better looking in their prime, Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise?
Right.
You pick, whatever your preference is, right? I have to say Paul Newman because he was alive when I watched, so I wasn't really watching Steve McQueen movies.
They both
while he was alive.
Actors. They both were badass.
I mean, Papillon, when he sticks his head out in Papillon, you're like, Jesus, just you can see.
I still can't believe he didn't win an Oscar for Cool Hand Luke.
Sometimes you have that year where it's like the 07 Patriots or the Carolina 15. You win all your games, or you lose just one, and then you get bounced in the end because there's so much more. Val Kilmer didn't even get nominated for playing Doc Holliday. The early 90s movies were just...
Ted Levine didn't get nominated for Silence of the Lambs for playing Buffalo Bill.
I think a lot of that, too, is the fact that like Ted Levine, like that kind of character at that time was so grotesque, they couldn't imagine giving an award for someone like that. Much like Ralph Fiennes.
Charlize Theron won an Oscar for Monster, right, Gerald?
Yeah, but that's because she was out of character.
Eileen Wuornos is just as much of a psycho as Buffalo Bill.
There was sympathy for that character because of abuse. At least that's how they portrayed it in the film. Plus, it was Charlize Theron, who was a bombshell that turned into a troll. But yeah, we talk about anything on the Lakers Nightcap here. We've gone 90 minutes delving into football, early 90s, late 90s, baseball.
Newman's own dressing.
Newman versus McQueen.
By the way, Newman's own dressing is the best salad dressing around.
And Paul Newman was one of the few Hollywood actors that was married for the majority of his life and portrayed Joanne Woodward.
He's got one of the best sayings ever about marriage. Why go out for hamburger when I have steak at home?
When you have that mindset and understand that, your stress level and your ability to live a comfortable life goes up. I love to go out with friends and have things.
You get steak at home, Joe.
But there's nothing like staying at home and then inviting people to your place, because then you create this sanctuary, not only for your family, but for your friends. I have a swimming pool for my kids first, but I also have it for my friends. I have tables that can light fire in the middle of them. I have a swim up bar so guys can stay in the pool and still have drinks while they're in the pool. Like, I didn't do that for me. I don't care about that stuff. I want it so that people come here and they can bring their kids and they can bring themselves so that we can sit and have a cigar, have a drink, watch the stars. Because my backyard's really cool at night, especially when it's a clear night. You can lay in the pool, lay on a bench, but whatever. Just go ahead and enjoy. It's about enjoying life and being at peace. And we don't talk about stuff normally, drama. You know, I have a lot of friends recently that are in the process of divorce. And when they come here, we don't really talk about that stuff much. It's more of, let's talk about movies and do things like that to kind of get your mind out of that situation. Sports is great. You know, again, I'm not a lot of my friends are as invested in sports as much as I am. It's kind of our thing. Movies too, typical guy stuff. I always say I'm a guy. Guys like movies, guys like sports, and that's kind of how I became what I became. It's just what it is. And then we share it here now with several, 1,600 people that have subscribed, and there's a good amount of people out of that are with us day in and day out and listening to our stories, and that to me is fun. I enjoy the dialogue.
Loyalty, Joe.
Loyalty is everything, and unfortunately, though, there is a talent that's not out there a lot, which is the talent of separation, the talent of cut the things. You have to get your mind in a situation where you don't want to lose the positive in humanity. You don't want to go, I'm not a people guy. And I've said several times during the week, during the months, people are X, Y, and Z. But even when
you're not Daniel Plainview, but you're not
right.
You're not,
I'm not Daniel Plainview. No,
you're
but
not
I'm
being
close.
a monk either.
I'm close, but I'm still trying, because you're not going to better society if you give up completely. It's a kind of like I'm a big fan of Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell is still rocking and rolling, by the way, in his 90s.
Is he still a professor at Stanford?
He is.
That's cool.
Yeah. And he that they asked, or the interviewer asked him a question a few years back. Well, what's the end game here for you? Like, where's your mind on this? Well, it's kind of like a standing 8 count. We're still not down. Let's try to bring it back. And I highly recommend any literature that man writes to read it, because it's filled with research and legitimate information. You can check it. You don't have to worry about it not being true. You can actually check it and see it, and it'll broaden your mind on a lot of things. I'm not particularly people worshiping. As we love Kobe, we love Magic, we love all these people in our lives that we love watching play basketball. But I don't particularly look up to anybody in that realm. As I've gotten older, I don't really idolize anyone. I idolized Magic Johnson as a child, as a little kid, a teenager. But I'm not enamored by anyone in terms of, oh wow,
status.
Status. Yeah, the older I get, the less it becomes a factor. And that's how that goes. Gerald, do you have any questions?
No.
Pretty good day for us, considering
Yes.
no Lakers news.
Well, like you said,
No
they
news
asked,
is good news right
and
now.
you delivered.
And that's the key here, guys. You asked, we deliver. That's part of this. My plan.
We need to ask something of them. We need to ask you guys out there, if you know somebody in your life that's a Lakers fan, please get them knowledgeable about the Lakers fast break. We need to grow. We need to get larger.
We need to add a zero behind the zero.
Yes, so we can continue to do this.
And there's going to be a lot more heat As the numbers go up, hopefully quicker than normal, and that's just what we're hoping and waiting for. And with that, I want to thank Gerald and Sean for being on the Nightcap tonight, and all of you watching here and listening. For those of you who end up watching this either tonight on replay or tomorrow or next week, thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing if you are subscribing for the first time. If you have any comments, any questions after we get off air, you can email us at LakersFastBreak@yahoo.com, or you can reach me directly at Joe Soro LFB, Sinblades_turf at Instagram, or Johnny Blade with the Punisher logo on Facebook. Until
no, well, actually, I'm just saying now we've got a shirt for Sean because he now has a saying that he's now known for on the show.
what, the D to the P?
D in the P.
D in the P.
Okay, that'll work. Remember that. Remember that, and we'll remember you as we sign off.
So, Joe's do you have a picture of your wife?
Yeah. and we'll leave it at that. We'll give you a little tease for tomorrow's show, where we'll let you know what's on the table for tomorrow. We're going to continue to see more NBA basketball, hopefully more games that end up clinching series, so that we can get to the end of this and get to the Final Four. And of course, until then, thank you again for being on here tonight, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you next time.